Hello and welcome to another episode of Scions of the Southland. As always, my name is Akshay Ishwaran, and joining me from beautiful Atlanta, Georgia, once again is a man who has conveniently time boxed this episode for 7:15 so that he can watch the national championship game in peace. It is Mr. Jake Grant. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing fine. Very excited to indoctrinate the next non-revenue sports chair of the Ramblin' Rec Club in that time too. So gotta stay on brand because it seems like that's the meat of our schedule today, is it not?
Oh, yes, it is. We do have a couple of news items to go through, and then we have a lot of non-rev, couple of football items that happened. I don't know. We could talk about that.
I
I mean, it
mean,
was a
it'd be a shame not to talk about at least Presley for a little bit, right?
true. I mean, all in all, it was a pretty light week on the flats. I feel like everyone's coming back from vacation. Some of the sports are still in action. We'll get into that as well. But yeah, like you said, a lot of non-rev talk on the radar today.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna say it's funny to write a Yellow Jacket roundup because I do that every week. In a week where everybody's talking about how nothing's going on, and I'm like, wow, I have three sports to talk about for the first time since March. So, you know,
You know, our non-rev writer appreciates it most when all of his sports come back from their scheduled quarantine.
oh, for sure.
All right, let's
All right.
put our usual 30 minutes on the clock. Are you ready, sir?
Yes, sir. Let's roll.
All right, three, two, one, let's fly. Academic news first, because this is an academically focused podcast, of course. Tech student athletes posted a 3.10 overall GPA during the fall semester. Mr. Grant, how should I feel about this?
Um, I mean, nerds do good at nerd stuff. That's good, right? I mean, any anybody that's averaging between that A and the B is probably doing
Especially
pretty well.
here.
I was gonna say if somebody said, "Wow, look, all of these athletes are averaging a 4.0," I'd go, "Hmm, we're
Question mark?
UNCing this stuff." And if they were all averaging a two whatever, like Texas football is really proud of, I'd also be like, what are we doing here? But seems reasonable, seems good. A lot of our student athletes are really bright kids too, and yeah, I like to succeed at school. I'm sure they do too.
I mean, we've had classes with athletes before, and usually they're pretty bright. Like I've appreciated their input.
I being a swimmer who's a mechanical engineer, I run into a lot of other swimmers, obviously club ones who I know, and varsity ones just from being in my class, and I thoroughly enjoy getting to hear their perspective on being a student athlete. That's probably what I see the most is swimming and track. But I'll always have lots of Ben Lammers memes lying around somewhere too.
Hmm. All right, moving on to other news items about Georgia Tech in general. Campus construction is still ongoing despite a pandemic. You mentioned to me earlier, before we got on the air, that the Eco Commons Park is nearly done.
Well, I have an exclusive from the Rumble seat tidbit that nobody else knows in the whole world, and that is that campus head honchos today were getting toured around it, namely one Mr. Angel Cabrera, who all of you probably know as Georgia Tech's president. So I assume with them being shown the sights, particularly, the head guy, we're probably pretty close to seeing that done. And every day that the campus is a little less of a giant construction site is a good day for everyone else. So
Just wait. Another plot of land will become a construction site. This
just
is the way.
wait till it's a big chunk of Bobby Dodd in a year or two whenever they actually start building that.
Oh god, I don't even want to. I don't even want to imagine. Just for some context, geographic context. If you haven't been on campus in a while, the Eco Commons, if I remember correctly, according to the map in my head, is a cross. It's where the old police station used to be, which I guess was just the police station before like 2019. Um, so that is what the corner of First and Fowler.
No, First and
My
Fowler
street knowledge isn't good.
is
First and
Rusty.
Atlantic.
Nope. First and Hemphill, the angled street.
Okay, 0 for 2. But yes, so that's First and Hemphill. It's right across from what is that? MRDC.
Yeah, the MRDC. For those of you who don't know, the MRDC. It's the one with the big weird concrete cylinders around it, and also the Mark, which is the one with the colorful pipes inside that ME2110 is inside. So yeah, lots of
Mm-hmm.
new. I guess do you call it an amenity, or is it's not like it's a sports field or like a you know a place for people to run around, but at least it's nice open space on campus.
Yeah, no, I'm never going to complain about that. Also, that whole place used to be a massive parking lot when I was
Oh
on
yeah.
campus, and that was 2 years ago. So I'm not going to complain about more green space
One
on
last point I
campus
want to make.
ever.
I was going to say one last point that I want to make that you just unearthed from deep down. When I toured tech, I don't know why such a strong takeaway was there's too many parking lots everywhere. And I realized that standing right across the street from the police lot. So, like, I feel validated in that, wow, there's too many parking lots. And then they're like, no, 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 no. We're tearing them all up. And now it's a park. And it only took them 5 years. But that's been a side of campus that's really been transforming for the last like 40 years straight. So now it's much more
Mhm.
campus and a lot less. This used to be a neighborhood that Tech Chime kind of just bought and took over.
Hey, there's room for capitalism at Georgia Tech.
Don't we know it?
Indeed. All right, let's move on to non-rev news. Women's basketball was in action this past week. They went 2-0, but I will admit I am upset about it. Mr. Grant, I don't know if you watched both of these games, the first one versus Clemson on the 7th, and then the second one versus Virginia Tech yesterday afternoon. Georgia
Um,
Tech looked bad to start both of them, and then they
yeah,
looked good later on, and it bothered me. Please discuss.
I was gonna say my takeaway. I didn't get to watch the Clemson one live, but I did go back and watch some tape and fill in the gaps in what I missed for Virginia Tech too. For those of you who are wondering where Yellow Jacket Roundup was, that is partially why it was super late. But one thing I want to say about this team in general is that this is not past Georgia Tech women's basketball teams. It's very easy to be like, wow, logical continuation. But past Georgia Tech teams were we work in the paint and we're really scrappy. And if we fall behind, it's really, really hard for us to come back. Point being here, I think maybe not last year's team, but any other Georgia Tech women's basketball team I've seen besides that, and even last year is a little bit questionable, doesn't win that ball game. Being down 10 late, having to make free throws, we didn't do any of that stuff until very, very recently, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, look, this isn't the men's team that doesn't know how to make free throws, and I say that with all due respect. But let's be honest here: the men's team is not good at making free throws. But the thing that was upsetting to me is like we've been talking all season so far about how this team, if it plays its cards right, is a tournament team, or the like even at a certain level, maybe our expectations or realistic expectations are that this is a tournament team. And
I don't even think that's a stretch to say that.
yeah, and this is the type of game, and the Clemson game too. Despite Clemson being actually a functional basketball program this year on the women's side and the men's side, which is also very weird. Anyway,
Because they didn't win the
like
national championship, they have to suffer there that their basketball team may be good.
a tragedy, a Shakespearean tragedy. But my point is like these are two games that you probably needed to bag pretty by like healthy margins, not like large margins, but you need to show that you are clearly better than both of these teams in order to back up this realistic expectation of tournament team. I feel like, and they didn't really pull away until from Clemson until late, and they didn't. They left it until the absolute last minute of play versus Virginia Tech. Um,
But then
yeah.
again, as much as I agree with you, Clemson they pulled away late. They led pretty big for a while there late, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't it like 20 points at one point?
It ended with Tech by 13.
Okay, but
I don't have the thing in front of me.
I was gonna say I thought it was more somewhere in the third or fourth. I should go check on that before.
I'm pulling it up. So vamp.
I'm gonna vamp. But at the end of the day, a win is a win. Like, granted, it's probably a reason why our RPI is a lot higher than our net. And like, I mean, you want them both to be good, right? But RPI, and granted, this is just one of the factors that we can measure our team's success by, sees Georgia Tech as a top 20 team, and we don't even receive votes in either poll. Even net, which, if we're parked at 31, we had been 28, but, playing certain teams and, the cascading effects of adding new teams to your RPI kind of and your net changes it in ways that you can't always predict with a, hey, we won, it should get better kind of thing. But even then, being a top 30, 31, 32 team, 28, I think we were last week, that should be getting us votes and polls. That should be getting us some sort of attention. And not that they haven't beat anybody, but like, it's a pedestrian 6-3, but it's still 6-3, I guess is the point I'm trying to say,
Mm-hmm. Let me walk back some of the comments that I made about the Clemson game, because looking at the game flow chart, this game was Clemson blew the doors off for most of the first quarter, and then it got close at the beginning of the second, and then Tech blew the doors off the rest of the way. So I have to eat a little bit of crow there. I guess I caught most of it, but I wasn't paying enough attention, it looks like. But if like Clemson is not a team that you should be starting. I maintain that Clemson is not a team that you should be starting slow against. And I think this is a theme that we have seen. We saw it last year too with this team, where they would start slow and they would get behind. But like you said, they didn't always necessarily have the juice to finish off the comeback. In this game, but versus Virginia Tech, if you look at the game flow chart, between the middle of the second quarter and the middle of the fourth quarter, VT was leading by a pretty healthy margin. At most, I think it was 10. I definitely saw it creep up towards 15 at one point, but I can't find that on the chart. But Tech played tough defense, especially at the end of the third quarter and into the fourth quarter, and turned that and turned it into points on the back end, and was able to pull this game out. At the end of the day, a win is a win, and I shouldn't complain. But I'm just sometimes I'm frustrated about the process.
Yeah, I mean, you have every right to be frustrated by the process sometimes. I think that's also a sign of kind of a privilege of expectation too, right? Like I'm glad that we get to have this conversation and say like, hey, like we can expect more from this team, because frankly, it stinks when you have teams or times or seasons when you can't say that about a team, whether it's women's basketball or anything else, and I think that Georgia Tech women's basketball is kind of building the floor of your expectations right here, right? Like, you lost in overtime to a pretty well-regarded Georgia team. You got kind of handled by NC State, but they're a top 3 team in the country. There's not a real shame in doing that. And then you have a loss pretty close going on the road for a second time to Notre Dame, a team that we've historically struggled with in an arena that both men's and women's basketball have struggled in. Like, it's not really a black mark on the team so far, but you look at those and say, man, make 2 free throws and we're not tied, or 1 free throw and we're not tied at the end of the regulation with Georgia, and we're 7-2. And then, make that play, that last play against Notre Dame, and we're going to overtime and maybe we're 8-1, right? So these are the hallmark, man, what good problems to have things. And you're going to drop a game. There's going to be a game like Virginia Tech that we're not going to win at some point, right?
I would argue the Notre Dame game was that.
Yeah. I mean,
which I guess proves your point, but yeah.
And it's the ACC. It's a strange year outside of Louisville and NC State, which are both in the top 3. No one else is ranked. So this weird middle part of the schedule, until we run into Louisville again, is going to be kind of a giant question mark, right? Granted, okay, next weekend we need to beat Virginia. Losing to them, and I need to knock on some wood. There, you guys can hear it. Would be horrible for our RPI, for our strength of schedule, for whatever you want to say. They are not a good basketball team. We need to win that. But everything else in the ACC is pretty, you know, who knows?
It's all that middle block, right?
Yeah.
It's we talked about this last year too, when there were two clear teams at the top with NC State and Louisville, and then the next 4 or 5 teams that Tech was a part of was just a block of what is going on here. No one can really figure it out.
Well, because even your usual medium teams, your Syracuse women's basketball, your Florida State women's basketball, who's ranked most of last year, we got a couple nice wins against them. UNC's usually a fringe top 25. You're not hearing a lot of smoke about any of these teams, really.
And Duke also canceled its season, so
yeah. So really, not who knows. That sounds bad, but like, it's a more stratified conference, I think, than it's ever been. A couple of the bottom teams are lower than they usually are, and granted, also usually it's Notre Dame and Louisville in the top 5, and not NC State and Louisville. But still, the good teams are really, really good, and the bad teams are bad, and everyone else is just shanking each other in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just to close the book on women's basketball for now, their next game, like we talked about, is versus number 24 Syracuse at 6 p.m. on the 14th, and then on the 17th, which is next Sunday, I think, at Charlottesville versus Virginia, and that's 1 p.m. on ACC Network Extra. Mr. Grant, I want to whip through the next couple items a little quickly. Men's basketball. Lots of COVID postponements this week. That was the terrible way of phrasing it, but we're going to roll with it. I think 3-4 games canceled. We're looking at them potentially playing NC State this weekend, but we'll see. Jake, you have swimming's latest meet on here.
Yeah, we swam against Auburn last Friday. Auburn is ranked 22 on the men's side, 19 on the women's. We kind of always knew that this was going to be a big test. Georgia Tech, traditionally, at least the last 2 years, has not been ranked for having really great depth and winning dual meets. It has been ranked for having the star power to win at the end of the season. And this was a classic example of that. Of note, there was no diving at this meet. So I think, especially on the women's side, which basically Auburn doubled up our ladies, we didn't see a lot of wins or a lot of podiums. But not having diving really hurt them. They're really strong on those events up and down that list. Let's see. Thinking about what else we have to say about swimming. If you're a regular listener, you've probably heard us talk about Kyle Pamputis, Christian Ferraro. Those two boys are very good, and between the two of them, won 5 events alone. Kyle won his typical 200 IM in both breaststroke events. Christian won both fly events. True freshman Batur Unlu, I really hope I said that right. He's Turkish. Won 2 events, the 100 and 200 free, and came in second in the 500. Sorry. So very good to see that at the top of the table. We're looking very good. And Kyle Barone also won a backstroke event. Not to ramble too long, but I think you can vouch for my logic here that I think the most encouraging thing we saw wasn't the expected, all right, the women kind of, didn't really hold a candle to it, but it was good to see new faces. We saw the same old from the men, and like it was good to see their typically successful swimmers step up. But I think the most important takeaway is probably those relay wins from front. Allowing a little bit more detail so you can comment on that. The 2 relays, which again, it's a dual meet. Coaches can kind of decide which events are swum and which aren't. This week we saw 2 relays, the 200 free and the 200 medley. And in it, On both relays, we saw a relatively unheard from this year true freshman from Central Illinois feature pretty heavily on both of them, and they both were winning relays. And I think that's my number one takeaway of, hey, we've talked about in the past that there's not a lot of depth, but look, both our relays were very successful, and we're getting these results from people that we really haven't seen do that in the past.
I don't know. It just sounds like you saw the state that this swimmer was from. Also, you didn't mention their name, but you just saw
Oh,
the state that this
Justin
person was
Alderson.
from, and
But yeah.
then just made them the focal point of your little spiel there.
I mean, I love to be biased towards the state of Illinois swimming, but no, Justin Alderson, true freshman. Uh, like we said, Batura Unlu, true freshman. These are good considering Kaio Christian, Kyle Baroni, um, Barone, Baron, however you want to say that. I don't really know. Um, they're getting old, you know. You got to find new people somewhere. But depending on eligibility and returns next year, I think they could have obviously a good showing down the stretch here, but add another recruiting class, another year to train and grow. Could be looking at a nice spring 21 and spring 22 for these boys.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And if I remember correctly, the latest results aren't in the USA Swimming database. But you said the men were still hanging tight at number 11 in the nation in our cap rankings, and the women were around 29th.
Yes, I will monkey with the weights on the events just to see if we can kind of get that to more accurately reflect a couple other,
i.e., juice Georgia Tech's rankings more is what he's saying.
Yeah, I really don't mind where the weights for our events are set right now, though, because they kind of overrate our teams. So it's nice to see us kind of close to the top 10.
Hey, comfortable margins of error, where we like those. We're all about margins of error.
Yeah. Speaking of margins of error, good to see Tech track successful in the jumping events. Those are typically pretty narrowly contested.
You're really pushing this margin of error joke. I can hear it, and I can hear it in every word that you're really focusing on it.
I got to get track in here somehow. It'd be rude not to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
They don't give us a lot in the results on this, but we do know our event winners. We got a dub in the triple jump, the long jump, the 800 meter, and the coolest thing I've seen out of track in a hot minute were both the men and the women sweeping the podium in the 1,000 meters. So good for them.
All right, nice job. Just a couple more news items before we roll on out of here. Football had its early enrollees roll in and move in this weekend, so that's cool. Classes start on Thursday, right, for the spring 2021 semester.
Yes, sir.
All righty, so we'll look forward to that. I didn't see a list on Ramblin' Rec, so I can't read anything out to you. We did mention earlier Presley Harvin III, who won the Ray Guy Award for the nation's best punter. Congrats to him. He's had one heck of a career on the flats, kicking the old pigskin.
Yeah, definitely a student cult classic favorite. It's rare to see the time when the punter is getting the biggest cheers when they announce the starting lineups, but I think that's pretty cool. So,
oh, it's absolutely cool, and that dude's leg is a weapon. It might have to be licensed in a couple of states once he graduates.
hopefully, not terrorizing any of our favorite NFL teams.
Hey, well, you don't care about the Bears, and also I'm, stricken with an addiction to the world's most heartbreaking sports franchise.
Just have the Falcons draft Presley, and then you get to walk on over to your favorite stadium and see him 8 times a fall. So,
with the fourth overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Atlanta Falcons select Presley Harvin III,
I mean,
punter, Georgia Tech.
he could theoretically contribute to them for 2 decades. That'd be an impact pick.
He could. That's the thing. Our punter right now is not that good. Every advanced metric hates him, and I would really like someone loved by advanced metrics for flipping the field.
Wow, you like advanced metrics? I'm shocked.
Shut up. All right, that about wraps it up for this week of news. Mr. Grant, you said you had something to plug at the end of this week's episode, so you have the floor.
Yeah, I don't get paid for plugging this. What I do want is relatively well priced, high quality collegiate gear that we seem to sorely lack at Georgia Tech, which is why by the time you all listening to this are, I guess, listening, Georgia Tech Twitter will hopefully be ablaze with From the Rumble Seat and friends advocating for home field apparel to be licensed to use Georgia Tech stuff. We know that this does not run into barriers on the home field end. We've talked to them, and they very much want to work with us. And Georgia Tech is a school with a lot of nice history that we could really make some good stuff with. Like I said, I have no financial skin in the game. I just really like their stuff, and they want to work with Georgia Tech. It's a great way to get their cult following involved in our program and are spending money on our athletics as well. So it would be very nice if you could drop a line over on, we're going to put out a open letter to administration, and hopefully that picks up some traction. If you have any connections, let us know, or let them know, or let home field know. Really whatever we can do to get in the door, because emails and letters have come back from Tech pretty unresponsive. So we're going to try and get a grassroots movement going, because I guess that's all the rage these days.
Who wouldn't want a sentient brand, in their Georgia Tech community or in their school community? I mean, what's wrong with another self-deprecating Twitter account around these parts?
If a sad dog and an antelope that says Zot and Indiana Hoosiers football can become well loved by random people on the internet, who's to say Georgia Tech can't?
Indiana Hoosiers football is way more well loved now, basically just because of home field.
Yep, exactly. It's a good business decision. There's literally no loss. There's not really much work required on Tech's end. And all that we have to do as Georgia Tech fans is buy some stuff. But that won't be hard. I am not even able to buy Georgia Tech stuff, and I still took care of the rest of my family's alma maters with home field this past Christmas. So definitely.
Also, again, to reemphasize, we're not getting paid for this. This is not podcast business. This is the genuine, genuine care, love and care. I don't know. I need another word for that statement.
Interest, demand,
wanting to spend money? Question mark.
Looking out for the best interests of Georgia Tech, I think is a good way to put it too.
Any way you want to brand it, home field apparel.
If, like I said, if you guys have any connections, if you guys are in the know, if you guys have any ideas, drop a comment. If you're reading this on the site, tweet us at FTRS blog, at Jake Grant 98, at whatever Akshay is. He doesn't tweet that much. We are,
as a rule.
I mean, and this goes for any company. We love Adidas, I guess. We love whatever we can get our hands on, right? We want to see cool Georgia Tech mugs and prints and shirts.
We will advertise. Let me put this out there. I personally will advertise your Georgia Tech or collegiate apparel brand. Obviously, once we get cleared for it, if we need to do that, I will advertise it personally if you send us free stuff.
I mean, I don't even need to get paid. If somebody wants to do business with us and they're a good company and they make good stuff, it makes perfect sense for Georgia Tech at the heart of Atlanta to be at the heart of some cool products and things, I think.
Okay, let's stop shilling for a sentient brand. Before we head out, give me your national championship prediction.
I think
line on the game is 8.5.
8.5 in favor of Bama. I think it'll come down to the last play, or not the last play, the last drive or two, and I think, oh man, I really want to be Big Ten bias here, so I'm going to do it. Screw them. Screw the world. Ohio State by 3.
Ooh, tough. You really want Ohio State plus, don't you? I don't know. Give me Bama in the points, or lay the points for Bama. I don't know. I don't know branding talk. Alabama by like 8, or I guess 9 in my case. I could see that.
Yeah, I mean
Justin Fields.
I was going to say.
Here's my thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Here's my thing. Justin Fields plays well enough so that he plays himself solidly into the top 4 of the NFL draft, but he doesn't play well enough to get him into the top 3. Capiche?
You just want him to be a Falcon next year.
Come on home, Justin. Come on home.
I think the game and the sport will be better off with a competitive game. So at the heart of it, I just want it to be all right. Ohio State had a chance,
Fine. That's the closing bell. We will see you all next week.